humans, welcome to the M Word podcast, brought to you by Martin. That's me.
And Matt.
That's him. Hi, Matt.
Good to see you face to face for once.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. No gatherings. No, not gatherings, is the right word. So thanks for everyone for joining us today. It's a slightly new format to our podcast, or a new element to it. What Matt and I found during our time chatting to sports people is that there's a lot of stories on the Isle of Man of, I suppose, inspiration that people can take from that aren't particularly sports related. So we've started the M Word, which is, I suppose, no longer the M Word podcast, sports podcast. So that will carry on, but we'll do stories that perhaps less sports focused, albeit one of our guests today is very sports focused. But the story we're going to talk about is less about less about the sports side of things. Mm. So I think there'll be an interesting chat. So first of all, thanks for joining us, gents. Richard, Conor, thank you for your time.
No problem.
Both the guys have been through I suppose, a traumatic event. I think to say the least. I think the stories, I've never dug into them, but I think there's some parallels, but also some different journeys, I'm sure, within there. We just wanted to dig into, understand how you dealt with that journey, I guess, and I'm sure that there's things to learn for everyone within the stories. So maybe to provide a bit of background to our listeners, perhaps we'll start with you, Rich. Your background, you Manx, or you from over the water?
From over the water, yes.
Right.
Born in Hampshire a number of years ago, but moved to the island with my parents when I was very young. My dad came over to manage the Villiers Hotel on the promenade, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners will be familiar with. That was a sort of a staple of the Manx social scene for a number of years, and had a bit of a revival in the 70s and 80s under his management. But yeah, predominantly educated in the island.
Was he based in Douglas yourself, Douglas School?
Yeah, well, we lived in a pokey little flat at the top of the Villiers for 12 years.
Not the penthouse suite up there, is there now?
Sadly not.
No.
But no, it was basically a few hotel rooms at the end of the hotel,
okay.
sort of with a partition wall. So it wasn't great. Although latterly, in my latter sort of 2 or 3 years in the hotel, sort of early teenage years, I graduated to a hotel room.
Oh, right.
Just outside the flat.
And did you work in the hotel and help your parents in there?
I did, yeah. I mean, got to the age of 12, and parents said, "Well, you got to work for pocket money now." So my first job was the worst job in the hotel, which was
toilet cleaner.
Not far above that.
Oh, right.
It was kitchen porter in the main restaurant on the first floor.
Right.
And then I graduated to being one of the operators on the dishwasher.
Oh, right.
So the Villiers hosted a lot of big functions, as I'm sure a lot of people remember. And so we'd sometimes have sort of 2 big functions a night in the Villiers, and
right.
Sort of get these periods of about 250 plates and associated cutlery arriving, which all had to be cleaned and dried, and then sort of.
So when you say dishwasher, it wasn't a dishwasher. You were the dishwasher.
Well, we had it was kind of a step up from KP. So we had what in those days was probably quite an extravagant dishwashing machine for the functions, and then I did a stint as porter in the Villiers for the sort of the last sort of couple of years that my dad was manager there. He then moved on to take over a place called the House Drake Hotel, which is on Harbour Road, Nonkin. Sadly no longer there. And I was working behind the bar there, probably illegally, from the age of 17.
Right.
So I've always...
certainly Isle of Man's your home.
Yeah, and, been around the world. I've lived in different parts of the world, but... here I am, and so I consider myself, even not Manx by birth, I consider myself a Manx person. Yeah. So it's a great place to live and work. It has its faults, like a lot of places, but particularly in the current environment, it is a great place to be.
Lockdown, but free to move around, but no borders.
Yeah.
And Conor, a northern boy.
Yeah, Manx born and bred, yes sir.
But on the sports podcast, we'd say you're Manchester the Hills.
Manx the Hills, yeah. Yeah, lived here all my life, in Grand North, Ramsey, so yeah, I'm quite proud to be from Ramsey, to be honest.
What schooling were you at up there?
So I went St Maccles when I was 4.
So you in the Maccled area, were you living in the Maccled area?
No, it's the actual school was actually called St Maccles.
Oh,
it was
in Ramsey.
in Ramsey, yeah. And then I just went through Old Infants and all that. Anyway, yeah. Secondary school was Ramsey Grammar School, who were actually very accommodating, shall we say, when I decided that I wanted to try and be a motorbike rider.
Okay. Was that quite a young age then, for that thought? I know your old man's obviously involved with the bikes. Is that planted the seed?
Yeah. Well, a bit of a backstory on that one. I was actually born in TT 86.
Okay.
So I couldn't not be interested in motorbikes, really. And my dad was racing and still races now, so I was born into motorcycling.
Yeah.
So I had no excuse.
So they give, I presume then, I guess then if you're in school, 14, 15, I don't know what age you can start racing bikes.
I started when I was 4, motocrossing.
Oh, right.
And I went from, did all local stuff, did an occasional trip across the pond, and then I turned the governing body, the Autocycle Union, they relaxed the rules, so you could be 13 years of age and race a 125 road race bike on circuits, but only if the club allowed you to do so. But unfortunately, our local club, for whatever reason, they wouldn't allow me to ride over here. So that set the tone for actually, if I wanted to race, I had to go off island.
Right.
So that was the norm for us. Yeah, right. And that's where the school came in good. For, you can go off, take a Friday off and
travel away.
Travel away, and then I just did short circuits, and I've spent my life racing around on motorbikes.
I promised my own mind that before we chatted I wouldn't ask a question about your height, but having based on a 125, and obviously they're small little things, back then were you a tall lad and struggling with that? But the pure fact you were still only 14, you weren't 6 foot.
Yeah, I wasn't quite 6 foot back then, and I was still, really light, and it wasn't really a massive issue. It was a bit of an issue, but not a huge issue really for a 125, and that sort of. I learned a lot of racecraft on a 125, corner speed and everything. I owe a lot to that sort of time of when I started out road racing, really.
Yeah. And at that age, how were you getting on? Results wise, were you doing well, or was it kind of just you were just doing it for a bit of fun, or when you're racing and potentially winning, thinking, yeah, I'm going to carry on and keep doing this?
It was purely on a club racing, a club level. It was all 13-year-old, and I was like, I remember actually I was sat on the Bridge Inn having a Coke with my dad the day it got announced, and I was like, oh, all excited. 13-year-old can go road racing. It was a massive thing, and the excitement of that, I was like, bloody hell, I can go and race a motorbike. It's all I've wanted to do all my life so far at that stage, and that was a big thing. And I never really sort of set out to do what I do today, really, on a professional level. So it just snowballed. Brilliant experience, brilliant life experience. Absolutely.
Traveling away, and so that kind of mentality. You think about privateers on the Isle of Man now. Was that a sleep in the back of the van type of trips? Were they at that age?
Oh yeah. My dad's a painter and decorator by trade, and used to have to empty the back of his van and to get the bikes in, and club racing. Went to a little club race at a track called Three Sisters in Wigan.
And there was a push bike race there, actually.
Yeah, I think they do. Yeah. And there was 6 of us sleeping in the back of this van. It was a corrugated iron floor.
Oh, nice.
And it was horrendous, but it was what we had to do and what we wanted to do, and as a family, it was awesome. I'd never frown on.
Like a free chiropractor sleeping on that.
Yeah. I needed one the next day.
Anyway. I bet. So we're going to jump, I suppose, forward to what we want to talk about today, because I'm sure we could talk about a lot more. But we want to talk about, I suppose, the trauma side of your respective incidents. So we'll start again. Flip back to yourself, Richard. Manx, you're working on the trams at the time, age mid-20s.
Yeah, early to mid-20s.
Yeah.
Kind of bit aimless in life.
Right.
Didn't have a clue what I wanted to do really, apart from the fact that more by accident than design, I'd ended up doing a drama degree in London. Right. Having originally wanted to do law. Don't ask, that's another podcast in itself. I'd auditioned for this course and got in, and I thought, well, I better do it, But I left with no sort of clear sort of career path, and I think like a lot of people from the island, you kind of tend to gravitate back to the island, so like a big security blanket, and needed some money, so I kind of decided to sort of do the job I'd been doing as a summer job for previous years while I'd been an undergrad, and ended up on the MER again. It's actually a great lifestyle. Cash was amazing, and
right.
Got to meet a lot of very interesting people on there. Ironically, before sort of, I guess we'll get to the accident, but before the accident I had, about 2 weeks before, I'd been on the tram when a guy who didn't seem to be in control of his full faculties stepped off the tram at Port Jack. And,
I remember that one.
Ended up losing both his legs.
Right.
So, a couple of weeks before, I'd actually gone through a traumatic incident with somebody who'd been.
I do remember that story when you first mentioned about having a tram accident. That's the first thing I thought of was it that accident at Port Jack? I never remember what happened. I just remember there was an accident.
Yeah, and it was quite shocking, and obviously, not having really experienced anything like that before, and fortunately, there was the tram was quite sparsely sort of populated, but there was an anaesthetist on board with his family on holiday.
The odds.
So exactly. So we kind of ran down because he'd stepped off at the by the toilets there, and just sort of stepped into the wall, and the trailer had run over him at his legs, and so it was obviously a bit of a mess. So there was an old black bin liner lying around, so he attended to the the blood flow issue, and I ran down to the chip shop. Right. So anyone got first aid kit.
Yeah, right. Yeah. A couple of plasters.
Yeah.
Solve the problem.
And so that was.
It's quite traumatic, I'm sure, in itself.
Yeah, it was, and the tram people said, don't come in the next day, but still.
They offer any help beyond that? Speak to anyone? I appreciate it's many years ago now. Perhaps the mentality was slightly different.
It was, and we'll probably come onto it, but you didn't talk about those things, right. And I guess more so people in the emergency services who were around at that time will probably tell you the same. You experienced it and you got on with it. Right. There was no kind of support sort of infrastructure in place. Right. But anyway, I was getting towards the end of the summer, and we approached. We were in practice week for Grand Prix, and I remember the date. It was August 22nd, 1991, and I actually remember going out to work that morning because I knew that I had a bit of an easy day because we were carrying a tram load of some kind of party enthusiasts or something out to Ramsey. Right. So my day consisted of going out to Ramsey and then kind of coming back to Douglas, and that was basically hanging around in Ramsey for a few hours, and then that was getting back to Douglas, and that was it. And I remember we stopped at Laxey on the way back, and it's about a 30-minute ride back to Douglas. So the halfway, it's actually called halfway. The stop is just by the Liverpool Arms, the ex-pub, and we were coming through Boldrine, and just going round a bend, and the trolley arm leapt off the wire. But you can tell this because the lights in the tram go out. Okay. And the trolley arm is spring loaded to avoid sort of damage to the overhead wires and the railings. You know, you kind of pull this. The trolley arm is attached to a rope which ties up next to where near the conductor sits. And I was pulling this thing down, and I slipped off. And
so while the tram's still moving, obviously.
Yeah, and you know, I fell sort of right down onto the ground and was sort of holding on to the bottom step of the tram set in motion. And at that point, you think,
so you're the front or the back of the tram at this stage?
I'm at the back, yeah.
Right,
the conductor sits at the back, and there's obviously a trailer being pulled as well.
So a comparison, perhaps people haven't seen the trams if they haven't been to Ireland. If you think maybe more visually for people who more famously, you think about San Francisco and the trams they have there, that kind of enclosed, but the back and the front end
it's
are
like
open.
a giant tow strap being pulled by an enclosed tram, isn't it? So I was, I mean, just, you know, it's a bit of a cliche, but you kind of think, things flash before your eyes, and I was sort of holding on to the bottom step, and you know, being holding on for dear life, and
your feet aren't dragging along the ground at this stage.
Well, there's obviously behind me, and you're obviously scrambling to your legs to get out of the way, and you know, I lost my grip. Fortunately, in hindsight, you know, I fell out to the left.
Okay.
And the trailer being pulled went over my right leg.
Right.
Apart from that, sort of fairly unscathed. I mean, apart from the thing that you know, that can get to you is, you know, if I'd fallen to the left, you know, I wouldn't be here. You know, you can do something with a leg, or you know,
you can't do it with your head.
Exactly. And so that was,
that
you
was
know,
luck.
it's very vivid. I mean, I'm sure, you know, Conor will have, you know, maybe a similar story, but it's very vivid. I didn't lose consciousness, but I knew I was in trouble because I sort of ended up in the fetus position on the left-hand side, and I could feel something on the inside of my left thigh, which was the toes of my right leg. I just remember people, I don't remember too much, although last year actually somebody who was on the tram approached me after having read my story and sort of filled in a few gaps, but you know, all I remember is this guy jumping off the tram and sort of, he was just basically, you know, just holding my hand going, you know, hang in there and stuff. And from the previous accident a couple of weeks previously, I knew that, I kind of knew what was up.
Yeah, right.
And I made a purposeful decision not to look down.
Yeah, right.
Because I could feel what the issue was.
I'd say at that point, when you're talking about there, those images and memories, is the, I know it sounds silly to say, was there searing pain, or is in?
Yeah.
Or is it kind of blotted out, like your body kind of goes in that mode that it's in such pain that it tries to,
it
knows you're in trouble and has that subconscious protected, or another, thankfully, being anything like that is whether all you feel is just intense.
I think initially it's across here, across my shin area. You know, if you get a little whack in the shin, it's all, you know. So, you know, basically the leg was hanging off. You know, basically, to be blunt about it. But after, I don't know what it could be, 10, it could be 30 seconds. I don't know. The adrenaline kicks in, and you kind of like, and you want to stay alert. You don't want to lose consciousness because you think, I want to stay with it. And I even remember telling one of the passengers to get the red flag out of the conductor's compartment because I knew there was a tram coming the other way about 10 minutes afterwards. And this is an era, you know, no mobile phones. There was no radio on the tram.
Right.
So somebody had to go and
knock on the door, I presume.
And I heard from this lady, a few years later, and just remember just how people were very upset, they were crying, and stuff like that. But all I remember then is two guys coming up with luminous yellow jackets, and they're kind of looking at me, just saying, "Oh, it's going to be all right. You're going to be all right." And I was screaming at them, and swearing, going, "What the hell are you doing? Help me out here!" Because I thought they were medics, but they're actually cops,
right, okay,
and they're from the roads unit.
Right.
Because where I'd come off, it was part of the track, which it was not near any part of the road.
Yeah, right.
So they had to negotiate an ambulance down the track,
right, yeah.
and I then remember, the ambulance crew coming and getting the gas and
Getting the happy gas on,
using a tank of that before I got in the back of the ambulance.
Right.
I think, and then it's very much like a cliche. I got a police escort. I remember the sirens going, and I remember coming out Nobles, in the old Nobles, the A&E, and you kind of on the trolley and you see the lights as you're being wheeled down.
What was going through your head at that stage?
Oh God! I lost my leg. I've lost my leg. But having the adrenaline and the gas sort of combined, they kind of make you do sort of fairly funny things. I remember there was a load of people in A&E just around me, and then they'll disappear. I remember having an X-ray, and they'll come back again, and I remember my clothes getting cut off, and because I was a little bit giddy, I remember a rather attractive nurse trying to cut off my clothes, and I think I may have tried to grab her.
But you blame the gas for that, didn't you? Yeah.
But one thing that I found out later, which I had in my favour, which I can thank the Manx Grand Prix for, was that it just so happened, and bear in mind time is of the essence with this kind of thing, that the trauma team at Nobles were in situ having a run through to receive an injured rider.
Oh, really?
Just having everyone who needs to be there was there, and I remember sort of remember my mum sitting with me in the ward because the ICU was full. I think they only had 2 beds in it at the time, but it was full and I couldn't go in. Remember I had to be put in the ward before I went for the surgery, and I just thought, the pain got quite intense there. And remember being wheeled in, and there was a mate of mine from school, Ian McVitie, who was who'd bust his hip, I think, at either Jerry or Andreas a week or two before. He was in the ward, and I remember seeing his face and getting wheeled in. And he's going, and it was just a bit bizarre. And in that old Ward 7 at Nobles, it was just a big room, a load of beds, and a little TV on the top. And I remember waiting to go into surgery, and I remember the accident was on the news. I think it was on what would be Look Northwest now, a border. And in those days, you could say the name of the injured party. So I was kind of just remember this. It was kind of a bit surreal. But by the time I got to surgery, I remember the last thing before I was put out, I begged them, because the pain's so terrible. I said, "Look, just take it off.
Oh, really?
Just finish the job."
Right.
Apparently, the doctors had said to my parents that it's literally hanging on by a bit of skin.
I always think about, because those obviously there's it's metal on metal, isn't it? It's tram track and a wheel, and it's just metal on metal. It's just, when you think about it, for me, my balls would disappear into my gut thinking about that. Jesus. Wait.
Yeah, but I remember coming round in the middle of the night, and there was a nurse checking me out, taking my temperature, something, and I looked down, and I saw my left leg, and I saw my right leg sort of heavily bandaged up, and from that point I thought, oh wow, got a bit of hope here.
It's interesting there, just talking about the few different things, and how you talk about, when you look at the positivity of, I was lucky not to fall off this side, I was lucky there was an anaesthetist near, no, not an anaesthetist, I was lucky. There's a few lucky. You'll take
Yeah,
the positives out of it. Obviously, a very shitty
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, I think, and I think it is those sort of those chance things that can, make or break a situation. I was lucky. There's probably other people who've had similar experiences who, those things haven't been.
Yeah.
They haven't been in place, but I remember it was just, it was quite. The first few days it was quite a surreal experience, and I was unwell as well. I got a bit of an infection. I had to be moved to a private room, and the issue with they can do a lot with bones. Even in 1991, but what they couldn't do so much with in the Isle of Man was the soft tissue, and although that it sounds a bit gory, but they tried to recover the stuff that I'd lost at the site, but it wasn't. I had about sort of four surgeries in about 9 days after the accident to try and
Rebuild
the leg with my soft tissue, but it wasn't working. So
well, maybe we'll dig into a little bit more about the surgeries. We'll jump over to Conor and talk about your incident. Pretty well known, to say the least. 2010, 150 mile an hour ish.
Yeah.
Right for Ben right-hander.
Give or take. Yeah.
So that was the year. The movie was made. That obviously everyone knows. I think it was that year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Recorded the movie, which I guess is one of the reasons the helicopter was around following you as well from the footage.
Yeah.
It restarted because of Guy Martin's crash.
Yeah.
Second lap. What do you remember of the situation? Or do you not want to?
No. I'm more than comfortable to talk about it. I'm total opposite to Richard, really, because I have no clear recollection of actually the incident. But it's been more after the event over the years where I think my brain is sort of steadily remembering stuff, which is really strange. But in terms of the actual incident,
what brings that on? Is that being in the edge, seeing it on the TV? Or was it just random times?
just time.
Right.
It's a time. It's I just just subconsciously started. You start thinking about these things weirdly, and you think, right, well, did that really happen? Am I feeling? The way I'm thinking now, is that what I actually felt at the time?
All right, okay.
Or is my brain just making this up just to make me feel better?
Gaps. Oh, yeah.
So many there's so many ways in which you can look at it, but the actual event itself, I really do not have a huge amount of memory for it at all, which is really strange, given the fact that it's so well documented. I thought that would sort of spark sort of instant memories, but I think because everything happened so damn fast, it doesn't really. You don't have time to think about it. You're going at, as you say, probably 150 odd mile an hour plus, really, on the side of the tyre. And next thing, I'm cartwheeling down the side of the hill.
Do you know to this day the cause of it? I mean, when you look at the video, it kind of looks, to me, as a non-biker, the back end just seems to bounce a couple of times, and then obviously the front kind of scoops from under you.
Yeah. Well, I think it's down to there was a lot of wind that day, and the way I sort of piece it together is you're going out towards you're going around the side of a hill, you're going out towards the coast, you're open, it's all exposed, there's no shelter, and all it took is really, I think, is just a bit of wind to catch me at the wrong time, the right sort of speed. I was on the side of the tyre, you're accelerating around the bend, the front can be a bit light as you're accelerating because you're driving, and I think it was a lot of wind. And I actually spoke with the marshal, the chief marshal. He was Mike Clegg, bless him. He was fit to give me a first, he's able to recite what actually happened.
Right.
And he said, I sat with him. I went to had a brew with him in Bar George one day because I thought I've got to get some kind of clarity on the job, you know. I went and sat with him, and he said,
And can I ask, just to interrupt, is that clarity because you want to rationalise in your head why it went wrong? Do you think that's the driver for that, or just?
yeah, it's important. I think when you crash, I think it's important, or when you have I don't know, it's general life really. If you fail, or there's a failure going on somewhere, you want to know why it happened, don't you?
Okay, yeah.
And in your head, you just box that job off, and then it's like, right, I know why that happened. I'm going to try and avoid that next time. So that was more or less why I wanted to.
Find out with ex-girlfriends when they dump me. It's like, I need to know why. Tell me why, and then I can box it off. Sorry, you were saying you went for a brew.
Yeah, went for a brew, and I wanted to know what he really saw. And so he was on the outside of the veranda corner at the marshalling point, and he was fit to tell me that he obviously line of sight is all critical with marshals. So he looked back up the road, and so to the corner prior to the veranda, and you see the riders come into view, they disappear out of view, and then he sort of counts a few seconds before we reappear from the left. And he said, I was a bit quicker getting to him.
Okay.
But he said, bang on line, in proper order, proper shape, didn't look offline or anything. He said, but that given moment, it got windy, and it went really cold.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And so that sort of gave me, so that paired with what I'd seen on the footage, it gave me a lot of clarity on what actually happened. So, yeah, it's quite a peculiar sort of set of, I mean, I don't really remember the first initial start.
Okay.
But the last thing I can remember is getting my last pit ball at the gooseneck from my Uncle Tynham.
Right. On lap 2, that lap.
On that lap, yeah. Right. And that's the only thing I can remember.
Right.
And I was like minus 3 seconds or something from the leader.
Yeah, right.
But I was riding really well all fortnight, and I was riding good, and I was really happy with everything, and I was gaining. I was confident.
Yeah.
Not overconfident. I just had a good gut feeling I was gonna catch the lads.
I think I watched a couple of videos and post. I appreciate this is like 10 years ago now, which is just time flies, doesn't it? Yeah. But you talked there about the first lap that you just kind of, it was steady into it, 130 mile an hour, but steady into it, and you, I think, 3 seconds off the lead, which is nothing. And then, and then it was kind of head down. Let's get into this type of thing.
Yeah, and it was. We were talking before, like going and doing BSB and stuff to get up to speed, and I'd had a really good run up to Northwest 200 TT in the British Championship in the Superstock class, and it was fighting for podiums and wins at certain tracks, and I was in really good order leading up to it, and I was in such good shape. My fitness was through the roof. I was 23 at the time. And I was in good shape going into TT, and everything was working fine. Bikes were fast, competitive. The whole package was great, and it just goes to show you that with the best will in the world, things can still, with the absolute immaculate preparation, things can still go off.
It's out of your control, isn't it? It's gust of wind
and you can only control what you can physically control, can't you? And the rest is sort of out of your hands,
And when Rich was talking about his story about the elements of luckiness in certain situations, if you look back at that footage now, and one of the common things people talk about is you bounced over the wall. Do you look at that that whole accident and go, I was lucky here and here? Do you have that, let's call it a positive attitude of that, or do you think I was damn unlucky because I fell off 150 miles an hour and it effing hurt?
I think when I really dig down deep and look back over it, I think I've been very, very lucky. I'm very lucky anyway, to be still here. It's incredible, really. But I think the one defining thing that really helped me during that incident was how fast I was going. The overall top speed, I think, is sort of give me that sort of, been on my side. I've crashed, I've gone down, but the sheer speed that I've gone off the side of the mountain is sort of, I think that overall momentum, if I can say that, enabled me to clear that wall.
Yeah,
You know, I've been bouncing off the ground. It's like literally someone, like a big hand's come down and just popped me over that wall.
Yeah. And you've kind of, from the footage, it looks like, I appreciate the helicopter's quiet, but it's literally a couple of feet over the wall as well. It's close.
I mean, that's what, just to be sat here now is a huge thing, but, you know, I shattered my humerus bone. That's what I clipped the wall with my left humerus, and that smashed my bone.
That's the nerve damage that you had post.
So
you were close to the wall.
I mean, I glanced at speed, but I think, you know, had I not have been going as fast as I was around that particular time, it might have been a different story. But yeah.
What's your first memory post? So I presume you're lying on the ground down there. You weren't. Were you conscious then?
I was.
Was the memory not there?
It's a bit fuzzy. I'll be honest with you. It's a bit fuzzy.
Not a bad thing.
But I do remember, A&E.
Don't remember the chopper.
No.
With how televised and on the spot there, are you there long? Do you know before you're picked up, sort of thing? Because I don't know myself the response times of from when crashes like that happen, especially up on the mountain, to being able to get out there.
I think the whole thing was turned around pretty fast. You know.
There is a helipad on off the mountain road. Whether the helicopter was there, I don't know, but it sits on the.
Well, I
Sulby
road. I was fairly close to the landing pad, which is unbelievable. But I mean,
a couple of more miles you'd have landed in the helicopter.
Yeah. But the big standout moment for me on that when I've gone through this whole process of rehab and recovery and found out actually how the state I was in. I was basically I dislocated my knee, and I severed all the tendons and ligaments and all the rest of it. So I dislocated it, but in doing so, it cut the blood supply from my leg.
Okay.
And so basically, Ollie, big German fellow, he's taller than me. You know, saying, you know, he's a big fellow, like strong as anything, and he basically saved my leg.
Right.
Because had he not have detected and felt around my leg for a pulse that wasn't there because of the dislocation,
right,
I'd have lost my leg.
Right. Okay.
And I know it's ifs and buts, but that's a fact.
Right.
And very, very lucky, and it was thanks to.
So he's the medic on site.
He was in the air med, and you know, but that just highlights just the expertise that these guys, you know, and it's a nice thing to know that you've got these people around you when you're terrorising around the track.
It's a high pressure position for them as well, in regard to they've landed on the side of the mountain, probably a helicopter loud behind them, and they're trying to analyse a rider in leathers and make decisions.
It just
stress around that, let alone.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about mentalities and mindset. Sorry, I don't know how those guys do it. I really don't. If I was in, it's a bit bizarre to say, but if I'd have seen me lying there, I wouldn't know. I'd have probably, startled and. This is a terrible situation, Just.
Did you know him beforehand?
No. Never met them.
It's similar with martial, especially I suppose being Manx as well, and I guess a lot of marshals are as well. When they see again a traumatic event, I'm sure that leaves an impact. I mean, you hear about marshals struggling when they see traumatic events as well, dealing with that.
It must be horrendous, to have to. And it's another thing. You sign up for to be a marshal, and you carry responsibility. And I admire people who sign up to give up their time, their own free time, to go and stick their name down and do the courses and stand on the side of the track just so we can go racing around the track. Very lucky,
I saw a clip. It was the bottom of the Garrow. Someone spilled oil a couple of years ago. The first rider down there, and the next few through, the guys are putting cement out on the road. Obviously, the bottom of Garrow, the guy, boys are going through there, 150 mile an hour, and the marshals are in the road, waving the flags 10 feet away from you guys. Everyone's slowing down, but you're still tramping on.
It's they have to deal with some like oil going on the track.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's
exactly, yeah.
panic stations.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
that's serious. If a bike hits that, you know, just could be terrible what happened after. But you know, there's a huge responsibility, and I've done a bit of marshal myself, Max Grand Prix, when I've been down on numbers, and you stood at the side of the track. You know, is at the mountain box and it's blowing a hooligan, and you're like, you know, the responsibility is massive.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned there the first recollections, the hospital, getting to the hospital.
Yeah, I was flat on my back, and at that stage, they didn't realise my back was broken, and my family and my team was stood around me,
Right.
and that was the start of it.
Pre any X-rays at this stage, I assume, is it?
Yeah.
Stuck in a hospital bed and.
Yeah, just because obviously there's a lot of swelling that's took place, and obviously swelling is a bit of a nightmare, isn't it, for identifying injuries and stuff, and they just didn't really, for whatever reason, they just didn't clock it straight off the bat. You know, my back was in a mess. You know, I did, 2 vertebrae were unstable, and 3 others were stable.
And these are ultimately close to the, whatever the word is, that you get
spinal,
paralysed.
yes.
That, you know, one of them gets damaged, you're in a lot more trouble.
Yeah, and that was the big fear, really. So that was when it was all like, right, okay, I need to go to Liverpool. Right. So I ended up in the Royal.
That
day? No, I was 7 days, if I remember rightly, I was 7 days in Nobles.
Right, okay.
And
was that just for I'm able to rest and the swelling go down, or were they doing stuff in those 7 days?
Just keeping me stable, really, and monitoring swelling.
Were you drifting in and out, or were you fairly?
No, I was flat on my back, and they ended up putting a back slab on my left arm just to keep that stable, so it can't get any worse, and you know, piling drugs into me just to keep me away from pain, you know. Right. And then it was over to Liverpool, so I was in the private airplane that they've got over to Liverpool, and then ambulance to the Royal.
Right.
And that was it for I was there for about 3 weeks, I think it was.
Right. Okay. So they scan you there and start identifying the problem, or more of the problems.
Yeah. I mean, it just like shit. This getting
worse. What was your head like thinking wise? Were you like?
I was a bit all over the place, to be honest. I was, you know, but even at that, I had to make some big decisions, because there was 2 sort of options really. One was let you back, you know, they'll put you in a body cast. So it was my lumbar section of my spine. 5 fractured vertebrae and 2 were unstable. So the options were that plus my shattered humerus. I had a fractured pelvis, dislocated leg.
All right, Conor, no one likes to show off.
Numerous abrasions around everywhere. Yeah.
Wasn't broken?
Yeah, that would have been the easier option, wouldn't it? But,
I mean, a lot of pain?
Yeah, I was in a lot of pain.
You've medded up.
Yeah, it was bad. Then it was, so one option was to put me in a cast for 6 weeks and hope was the word that was used, you know, that made me vertebrae sort of stabilise.
So they talked to you at that stage about you might not walk again. Is that a conversation that happened?
There was all sorts, yeah. There was like, it was when they come around and say, right, you know, what do you want to do? Basically, you want to have an operation on your back and stabilise your back, or do you want to leave it? And I said, well, to be honest, I want to get back racing. You know, I want to get that. I've got a plan now, and if I'm going to do that, then my best option is to have it fused.
So that was pretty early on. The mindset was, I want to get back racing.
Yeah,
that's what you know.
Yeah, I was led down my back. I couldn't move. I was looking at ceiling tiles all day. I was red hot slap back in the middle of Liverpool, sweating like God knows what, and I was like, I just want to get out of there, you know, get me fixed and get me out of there now, you know. But I had to just sit tight. That's why I signed on the dotted line. I've got to get me back. 2 rods and screws into me vertebrae. And
what were the family saying at that stage?
Obviously, massively concerned. Mum and Dad were, my family were flying over to see me in Liverpool. And they were massively concerned. Like, but
do you talk to them about want to go racing again?
That was a big discussion, like, you know.
Yeah, right. Were they like, what?
what do you want to do? You know,
Right, okay.
well, that's nonsense. I actually say I want to go back racing again.
Right.
You know, it's my decision. I'm a big boy. You know,
Yeah.
time to make big boy decisions, and I thought that's what I want to do. Yeah, my gran at one stage, because I was working prior to going professional at road racing. I used to work in a bank as a cashier, and my gran asked me one day, so are you going to give up the bikes again and go back and work at the bank or get a normal job? I think it was. I was well accustomed to going racing motorbikes. That's what I want to do. And I just said, no, I'd sooner throw myself off the veranda again, like, you know. So I was hell bent on going back bike racing.
Right,
you know.
right.
That's cause that's all I wanted to do was race bikes, and yeah.
So that was a 11-hour surgery, I think I read on the back.
13, I think it was in the end. You know,
I mean, you think about the surgeons that are doing that. It's just,
incredible. My surgeon, there's numerous surgeons there. Marcus Damatis, he fixed my back, and his team, and Joe Banks and another guy called Matt. They fixed my arm and my knee in Broad Green.
and are these kind of all not simultaneously, but pretty much happening in a fairly short space of time? It's not fix your back, let you sit up, and then start on your arm. These are happening.
Yeah, I mean, I fixed me back. I had 72 staples in my back, and all the dissolvable stitches and all that stuff. And then they waited a week, I think it was, to do surgery on my humerus.
It's not long, is it? Yeah. Much pain? Oh, that's a stupid question.
It was
Manageable pain.
as long as there was morphine there.
Yeah, right.
I was okay. You know, I had this little blue machine. You just hit it.
Oh, right. Keep your finger on it.
Yeah, it's just like I couldn't get it in quick enough, you know. But I needed it, you know, just to make me comfortable. But you know.
And sorry, Matt. Looking back when you're in that phase there, you thinking about the accident, thinking about what went wrong? Are you having? I mean, they talk about people even being angry with, did I make a mistake, and getting frustrated. Were those thoughts in your head at that stage?
I'll be honest with you, I was more pissed about not winning the race.
Oh, right, okay.
And, you know, I was frustrated. But I thought, get a grip of yourself, you know, you're alive. You know, there's a lot of people that are not able to say that, and it's, you know, I just instantly tuned my head into being, I've got to be grateful here, you know, I'm a very, very lucky person. And, but yeah, I needed, after that was the case, I need to know why this happened, you know. That's why, as discussed before.
Yeah.
And I say, during those, the time in the hospital there, and as you're saying, after the back surgery, it was 7 days to the arm surgery, and probably in between in and out. How was your mindset there? As in, I know you said you wanted to kind of get back on the bike as soon as possible, but did you have moments where you weren't
Self-doubt and stuff, isn't it?
You weren't as positive it was going to get there, or was it very much, it doesn't matter what anyone says, I'm going to be on the bike?
The overall focus was there. The goal was there, but from being flat on my back in hospital to actually getting on the bike again, it was like that. Yeah, it was up and down. It was just ridiculous. It was such an emotional roller coaster.
So that'd be you make some progress. We talked about it before off air. You make some progress, and then it would kind of plateau, or maybe even step back, and you'd.
Yeah. I mean, I went from being fully fit to, you know, to going through all that trauma to actually going, you know, working with Kath Davis, my physio, and setting a goal. And my goal was to be able to put my socks on.
Yeah, right. Was that a lot about it? And same with you, Rich, small goal setting to start
I think,
that rebuild.
I mean, I was told sort of fairly on in the process that if I kept the leg, then I wouldn't be walking without a stick again. And you come to accept that. But I think as you kind of know your own body, and you know how far to push things, and it's kind of said, it's about setting little goals and not being stupid. I mean, the extreme is, I'm going to be running a marathon in 5 years.
Race a bike.
It's about sort of setting realistic targets for yourself
Yeah, right.
and achieving them, and then sort of.
Is that a daily
incremental
process?
It was slightly different for me in that. I mean, I had lots of time to think.
Yeah, you know, I imagine that's part of the problem almost.
You know, I had. You go from sort of, you go through a sort of a surgery, and then you kind of wait, and then you have another surgery. The reason for me being flown to Liverpool was I needed to have, basically a leg rebuilt from, as it turned out, from other parts of my body.
Oh, right, okay.
But in between those periods, building up to that big operation, and then sort of the recovery from that, and then coming back to Nobles to sort the orthopaedics out, you've got plenty of time to think in between. And it's hard to stay positive, but it is important to sort of set yourself little goals, and while you're on your back not being able to move, it's tricky. It's tricky to vision that, but particularly in the the post surgery, the post leaving hospital period, I think it's I did a couple of weeks of physio in Nobles, and then I was discharged in time for Christmas, and you have daily physio, and it's about sort of seeing those, making those little sort of targets and meeting them, and
are you setting them, the physio setting them, what's...
I remember physio Michelle, she said pretty much on the first day of my physio with her, she said, this is 95% you, 5% me. So you do put a lot of trust in the physio, but it's being what you're comfortable with. I mean, I used to go to the physio and see people doing things and think, I wish I could, no way I'll be doing that. But as your recovery continues, you become a little more confident. You get a bit more aware of what your body can take. Ironically, I probably pushed the recovery too much initially, and did too much, which caused me a bit of a big setback later on in my recovery period. But
and what's that pushing? Is that like drive, motivation in you, or just?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's because I didn't have a job, I didn't have a bike career or anything like that. I didn't have anything. This accident that happened, and it was like, it's the only thing I had to focus on really. Which had good points and bad points. It's probably good in the short term, but in the longer term, not so great. Because it consumes your whole life. But I wanted to be defined more than an accident. I mean, the first thing that anybody ever met said to me for about 2 years afterwards, how's your leg? And you become defined by your leg and your injury, and you go, well, actually, I want to do other things. I want to move on. I want to forget about it. I don't want to be defined.
Sat here now talking about it. Sorry.
It's only the second time in 20 years, 20, 30 years. But I didn't want to become defined by it. But I can look back on it now and think, well, actually, you know what? Ironically, it probably did more good than harm, if you like. It sounds weird, but it gave me a focus, and it gave me a purpose initially in terms of recovery, and then it gave me an opportunity to think about my life and where I was going, and then it gave me an opportunity indirectly when I was mobile to travel and to do something with my life, through the compensation for it. I mean, and I can look back on it now, and I think even to what I do now, I look at I started my own business 18 months ago, and similarly kind of scratching around in the dark really, career wise, thinking, what am I going to do? And I thought back to, well, how did I think? What was my mindset when I was recovering from the accident? If I had a series of targets, and a focus, and you work at it, and you get there. And I think I tried to apply that kind of thinking and determination to my career, and I don't know Conor that well, but I sense it in my dealings with him that he's he has that sort of same drive and determination in his.
That was an
his career.
observation I was just thinking about today, was you both ended up with your own businesses, and that drive to do that is that, you know, a byproduct of
Could be,
that
yeah. I think
drive
it's
to...
about, you know, having faith in yourself and having trust in
Yeah,
yourself, obviously in very different scenarios, but you can apply that thinking into any situation, really.
Yeah.
If you want to do something, if you want to achieve something, you can do it. You just got to work at it, be realistic, and be resilient, keep at it.
Which is the same as the rehab stage.
Yeah, and you get a series of challenges and hurdles and difficulties. You know, mine came, you know, I was getting not cocky, but I pushed my recovery too much, because I had to, you know, basically had a new leg. You know, at the time it was quite pioneering surgery. I basically lost it. Turned out, but it's lost the middle of my leg. You know,
Right.
skin, bone, muscle, everything. So what the surgeon did in Liverpool was took my latissimus dorsi on my left shoulder.
Okay.
Put that in the gap.
Right. Okay.
I had skin from my thigh, veins from my leg, and then when I was in hospital in Liverpool for a couple of months. Came back Nobles and did the orthopaedics, and they managed to pin the leg,
Right.
but not with because of the damage, with not a very wide pin.
Right.
And because I probably pushed the recovery too much, in about 5 or 6 months after I was originally discharged, I remember my leg got really warm.
All right.
Down below and swelled up. It was really hot, and I could. Sounds a bit cool. I could dislocate the lower part of my shin, and I could hear this scraping sound. And I remember saying to Michelle and Physio, I said, "This isn't right. You know, it's really sore." And I put my foot down, and she said, "Well, it's not the pin because
Yeah.
they're made of strong stuff, and it's titanium, I think." She says, "Yeah, you can't have broken that, but we'll take you to X-ray." And got to X-ray, and I snapped in two.
Right. So that
Probably
warmth was
because-
blood, I assume, coming out.
Probably because you remember Uri Geller, and or if you get actually you used to bend spoons and he'd break them, but
Yeah.
if you get a spoon and you kind of apply a little bit of pressure backwards and forwards on a spoon or a fork, eventually it gets really hot and it just
Oh, right.
it snaps like
Yeah.
really easily. Basically, that's what had happened.
And was that just because you said you were trying to walk on it? Or
Yeah, I'd sort of got off the crutches too early. Was walking with a stick. I think probably trying to prove to myself that I wasn't going to be beaten by this. But in fact, I should have stayed on crutches for probably a year or two longer, to be honest. And but the constant pressure every time you put your foot down, because the leg wasn't straight, I was putting pressure on the pin, and eventually still gave way, and that caused a bit of a setback because although they can recover the top part of the pin quite easily, when you just kind of lift the kneecap up and pull it out like a cork out of a bottle, it's a bit tricky to retrieve the bottom half of the pin. But they managed it, and they managed to put in a larger pin, which I still have to this day beside my bed. It's not in the leg.
Okay.
So it basically bit of a setback. Ironically, it happened before TT again. So obviously there's no room to do elective surgeries at that point. So I had that big leg in plastic.
Kind of gets the priority. Yeah.
But I did get free into a couple of nightclubs because I've come off the bike and practice.
All right.
No,
That's why it's not dancing away. That's the problem.
You may be right, but I think in terms of recovery, just be realistic. I was probably bloody minded.
Were you bloody minded before?
Stubborn.
Right.
Stubborn, I think.
Right.
I wasn't really a hugely outgoing person. I sort of kept a lot in, but I could be stubborn about things. And like I said, I think just before we came on air, I became very single-minded about it.
Right.
Everything I focused on was going to be about this recovery. To the exclusion of pretty much everything else in my life at the time.
Even family around you, kind of.
Yeah, well, my mum and sister had been over in Liverpool with me, and which was great. Yeah, I mean, it was pre-mobile phone those days, and so I used to get letters sent to me in Liverpool, which was great. But that was the only means of communication, really.
Right.
And when I got back to Nobles, that was good. A few visitors in, but yeah, you kind of. I didn't have a job to go back to.
Right.
It gave me an opportunity to think, well, what am I going to do?
How many surgeries did you end up with in the end? Having surgery? 13 surgeries. Yeah.
I mean, a few of those were like I had the one immediately after the accident, and then I had sort of, I think it was 3 or 4 I was flown off to Liverpool after about 9 days, and I had about 3, I think, before I flew over. I think every other day, and that was just to see if the tissue that we'd covered would take, if you like, and it didn't. But fortunately, the surgeon at the time, Mr. Green, was ex-British Army, and he'd seen a few sites, and the injuries I had, with bone tissue loss, are very, they're sort of very compatible with a bomb blast.
Oh, right,
shooting.
okay.
And I didn't know much about what I was going to experience in Liverpool. He said, we can't do much for you to get across.
Yeah.
Because it's, he can do amazing stuff with bones, but if you haven't got the soft tissue, there's not much you can do, really.
Yeah. So you mentioned before we came on, you start going through that rehab phase and coming out of hospital, and then the small goals you get to, but then things start to platter out, and that struggle with that. Kind of how long into that, sort of from the day of the accident, was that? And were you aware that you started to get that way, or was it what shook you into realising, I need some help here?
Yeah, I mean, after, and I was in hospital for about 4 months initially, and then I got let out for Christmas. And then I was back in for New Year for bone grafts from a pelvis. And then, had a sort of a physio every day, Monday to Friday. I was there sort of 3 hours every day. And then that recovery, talked about being on a stick, everything seemed to be going swimmingly, amazing, people saying, oh, what a great recovery. Then I had that setback with the broken pin, kind of like, you kind of think, oh, that's not so great. And then after...
I guess that must as well play in the back of your mind there, that you've been told you're doing so well, and to what you kind of see as normal. No one's telling you at this point you're doing too much, you're carrying on and you're progressing, so that when that then happens and you have to kind of rewind the clock, as it were, is that in the back of your mind there, that, okay, well, I can't do those steps as quickly as I want to, or I already know that from my initial point to here, this is my time frame. Well, I already know if I do that, I could end up again. So whatever I want to be, I'm going to have to double this. Or
yeah, you kind of realise actually, it was kind of the start of the slowdown in the recovery, if you like. And shortly after I'd had the new pin put in, the physio, not Michelle, but the kind of head physio said, oh, I don't think you don't need to come anymore. Which was, kind of really, really hit me a lot. I was going, well, I'm crutched, I'm still. And looking back, I maybe had a point. I think I'd become institutionalised. I'd had several months in hospital with, just lying there and people doing, your food brought to you. You want to go to the toilet, somebody brings that bowl to you. Everyone's coming to you. And all you got to do there is lie there and take it, really. And then after I got discharged initially, you got that routine of physio and
the purpose, I guess. You get up, there's a purpose to go. You go to
yeah,
physio,
but it was probably fairly early on before the pin broke actually, because I started just before I left. It was about a week before I left after my initial stint in hospital. Nurses said, "Oh, you're off any drugs now," and so
even pain relief.
you can have a. They brought me this. They said you can have a Guinness and can of Guinness if you want. It's good for you. So I used to have this. Remember the first can of Guinness? I was just flaked out after unconscious. But when I left hospital, I started to. I was not saying I was out every night, but I'd friends were very good to take me out, but I'd sort of start drinking Guinness a lot, and I noticed I was having trouble sleeping. I'd kind of wake up with a sort of explosion going off my head, and sit, not bolt upright, but I'd be kind of awake, and that was the kind of start, I think, of the sort of post-traumatic stuff. I think because you're so cocooned in this hospital bubble, and you've got this sort of routines in the mornings, but then in the afternoons it was like, well, I'll go down, I'd sleep in the afternoon.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And then I just sort of, so I wasn't very active, and then later on in the year, I was still having trouble sleeping, I was drinking a lot, and I got it to probably about 16 stone.
Right.
When you've got that kind of, carrying that body weight on that kind of injury, not great, and you don't feel great about yourself, you can't sleep, and you kind of...
Was the family around trying to steer you in the, not that you go in the wrong direction, but in the, keep an eye on here, do you want to stop drinking a little bit, that type of thing? Was the people around you saying that?
I think I probably just kept it pretty, I don't really talk about it, really. I mean, I don't know if I think I had a drink problem, but it's just what I was drinking. I wasn't very mobile. It has an effect, but it helped me sleep, and I'd sort of, I said, get these sort of I don't know if they're flashbacks to the accident, but they were kind of images associated with it. So there was always a big explosion, always like a bright light, like lightning.
Right. Okay.
And even to this day, I think I wasn't before the accident, but I'm quite fearful of thunder and lightning, because it kind of reminds me of the images associated with the accident, the noise, the crack, and it still sort of freaks me out a little bit.
Was there a tipping point somewhere where you realised things were getting on top of you, if that's the right term, or?
I just lost motivation for kind of just to do anything really.
Right.
I wasn't going to the physio. I didn't have a job. I was 16 stone. I was on crutches. I did living at home. Didn't have a lot going on in my life. In my mid-20s.
And that stage, were you kind of, were you blaming, going, well, what you fucking look at me?
You kind of then think, actually, just, why did this have to happen?
Right.
But I remember going to the doctor about, I can't remember what it was about. Dr. Chalmers, passed on there, but on the Promenade Medical Centre, as it was actually on the Promenade. And I'd seen him about something, and at the end I said, can I talk to you about something else? And he said, I said, I'm just not, I just don't feel right, I just feel really flat. And he said, he kind of, I think he twigged what was up, and he said, I'm not going to put you on anything, but you should make an appointment to see this this person up at, there was some sort of, I can't remember what it was, but it was on Harris Terrace.
Right.
It turned out it was a lady who dealt with psychological problems.
Yeah.
But I made an appointment to see her, and I went to see her, and it was, you might recall, a very nice lady called Jan, and she sort of recognised the problem, but she kind of admitted that she wasn't a sort of specialist in the sort of the post-traumatic sort of stress area. So I didn't really apart from that conversation, I didn't have anything really. And I wasn't really the kind of person to talk about stuff.
Yeah. Again, we're talking 30 years ago as well.
Yeah, I keep a lot in. And I just sort of lived with it really.
Right.
And the only thing that sort of really helped me, and it did genuinely help, was a friend of mine who had a serious accident, as it turned out, and which I knew nothing about. He lived across, and we were having a conversation in Bushies one night, and I was, how you doing? And I said, well, I'm not feeling too great at the moment. And he talked about his accident. He said, it's. He said, I had exactly the same thing. He says, but you will get better. You will get over it. And just that kind of small conversation.
Kickstart the right direction.
It got me thinking.
Stop it going that downward.
Yeah, and I sort of tried to put a bit of structure in my life. So I thought I need to get a job. So I applied and got a job with an insurance company.
Right.
Where I stayed for 2 years. Insurance wasn't for me, but it gave me that sort of structure and that kind of.
I think you need that structure in your life, full stop. Whether you struggling with injuries or whatever, that's that structure and routine. And I think humans are built for that. I think they function best in that environment typically. They do,
yeah. And I know everyone's different, but I agree. I think you need some semblance of structure and a purpose. In life.
Yeah. So a question we asked Conor there, just those early days when you were in hospital, was there any, because I've read stuff about when after the accidents or incidents and trauma, people look back and are angry, they analyse what happened and perhaps get frustrated and angry with themselves for, well, if I hadn't done this, I wouldn't have slipped. And did you have any of those moments where you were...
No, I can't think of a time when I was particularly... resentful about what happened. It sounds weird, doesn't it? But
well, it's a good thing, because I imagine you can batter your head with it, thinking because ultimately it's happened. There's nothing you can do about it now. Yeah. So
I mean, people are asking me, "Oh God, you were a lucky one." I go, "Well, actually, no. I think I was actually quite lucky."
Well,
if you think about it, if I could have been a lot worse. So if you look at it like that, then actually, I'm really lucky. And I think. I think it's in the sort of longer term view of things. I think it's helped sort of in terms of my mindset. I always looked on the recovery as I always try to think positively about it. Not a kind of why me. I was in hospital with people like that.
Right.
Both in the Isle of Man and in Liverpool, there were people who. They saw it as. Some people saw it as a money-making opportunity.
Yeah, right.
Particularly, obviously, in relation to, compensation.
What's your views, and both your views, on something I was reading today as well about the mind and that when we spoke to Richard Slee about psychology, they've done studies where if you think about lifting weights with your arms, you can grow muscles. So the mind's that strong that it can trick your body into do that. So why wouldn't that apply to rehab of broken bones to speed up that process? What's your general thoughts about that?
If I've got this right, I think I've got a prime example for that. When I shattered my humerus, I stretched and bruised the radial nerve, so I put my left wrist into a sleep. I couldn't lift my fingers or lift my wrist, but it was like muscle memory and all the rest of it. With Kath, once I was able to, she was able to get my hand, lift it, and I was mirroring it with my right.
Okay.
So all muscle memory was kicking in, and it was all really through your head.
Right.
And I was just training my left wrist to operate again because it was in a deep sleep, really.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's an example of that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So looking at your rehab there, those phases, how many surgeries did you end up having? If you can remember.
4 surgeries.
Right.
One, they did my back, so they put rods and bolts in my back. They stabilised my left leg, and then revisited it to do me left arm,
Right.
and then did a hamstring harvest and everything from my right leg
Okay.
to make tendons,
knee.
etc. for my left knee.
Right.
So after that, it was just a case of hyperbaric chamber.
All right. Okay.
With Dave Downey there in the team, and Kath Davis from Rex Physio.
Right.
And I think the one single thing that really got me through everything was the people around me.
Okay.
Like that support mechanism of family, friends. I consider myself very lucky in that respect. I think that really got me through a lot of the crap.
That's what, again, chatting to Rich about getting through those things is, he said one of the biggest things is that family support network around you.
Yeah.
And then having a physio specialist who can help you focus on these small goals to build.
Yeah.
I think, particularly in terms of, the family support is vital, and I was, fantastic support. And I think particularly when I was in Liverpool, because it was a plastics and burns unit for the whole of northwest of England up to, borders of Scotland, right down to North Wales. And, I was lucky because, my mum and sister had friends to stay with near the hospital,
right.
but there's some guys when they're getting a weekly visit from wife and kids, and you think, wow,
Lonely
it's
place.
pre-mobile phone, and you kind of, you're like,
Lonely place, isn't it?
like you're in a military hospital waiting for the letters to come every day.
Yeah, right.
And it was important they were there. Even you run out of things to say after a while. Sit there reading my magazines, but it's important.
Just company.
It's important to have them there.
Because your physio is only small amount of the day where you concentrate with your nurse or whoever it may be. The rest of the days, if you haven't got anyone there to support you, you're left with your own thoughts, and as motivational and as encouraging you can be to yourself.
Be your own worst enemy, can't you?
Yeah. So I tell you what, the nurses are so important in your recovery, not necessarily only from the application of injections, whatever it is, but from the mental side, particularly in orthopaedics, because you usually sort of pretty compos mentis, but you can't move, so you're often kind of not ill or out of it. You're generally aware of what's going on, and the nurses play such an important part in keeping your spirits up, having a laugh. I remember the morning I was getting flown to Liverpool in the afternoon. Didn't really know much about what was to expect, and two nurses came in with a bowl of water and a rubber tube, and they said, well, they won't let you on the air ambulance without full enema. And I was like absolutely petrified, going, you're not sticking that in me. And I started wetting themselves because it was all wind up, of course. But it was just little things like that, just keeping your spirits up. And because, it's for some people on the ward, it's I'd spells in a ward a lot of time on my own, but it's about you can be quite lonely.
I'm sure.
If you're in a room your own, and, they're there to sort of have a chat, let you know what's going on in the outside world, and they do play a vital role in that part of anyone's recovery.
And Rich was talking about the setback within his rehab. Did you have much setbacks at all, Conor, or was it very much? I used the word plain sailing in respect of put back together, but
it was more just getting the operations. Really, that was the biggest sort of kick that I had. But then it was just more sort of psychological, really, along the way. Whereas becoming a bit difficult, I'd have we're only human. We do have down days, even in the best of health, really. But when you are pretty much rock bottom when you're injured up and you can't move and do your normal daily functions. I found myself tying myself in knots, really, and you'd have all, There was once where I actually went for a checkup in Liverpool and I never got to see my surgeon.
Right.
And I was totally focused on racing a bike again. That was it. That was all that was happening. I was going to get there. Been busting my behind just to get on a bike again, get myself fit, and everything was all good. I went for a checkup, and my surgeon couldn't see me, and I got his like an understudy, if that's the right thing. And she said, "I don't think you should be riding a bike again." And I swear, it just sank me, and it put me on a really bad track. And I thought, right, well, she's clearly talking to me. She's telling me this because she believes it, But it was a total different opinion to what my surgeon, who had seen my back
from day one,
put me back together again. It's easy to get sidetracked, really. That's if I remember I took a bit of convincing, really, because I could have easily gone down that path and gone, right, maybe I shouldn't. I thought I got myself back on track again. That's just one sort of little blip, I wasn't the most I probably wasn't the most nicest person to be around during my rehab as well. Just occasions where I was probably snappy and wasn't.
What caused that, do you think?
I was medication. I was I was getting tired and really ratty, and it was a real test. Obviously, it's just a big head game for getting back, and it can take the slightest thing and it really mess you up, and because you're trying to get all your strength back and get strong again, and then I've gone from, like, as I say, from being fully fit to trying to get my socks on, being a big challenge, building myself back up, building the strength up, and you building your head up as well with your mental strength, and it's a huge challenge.
Did you have access? Appreciate it was 20 years after yours. Did you have access, or were you given access to? I use the word therapist, if that's the right word. Psychologists. Was that part of an NHS thought process, or did people around you say, "Do you think you should chat to someone"?
No. It was never really brought up in conversation. To be honest, it was more physical. On the physical front. I mean, with everything that went on, I ended up I was anemic. I went down to 9 stone 7, and I couldn't eat. I wouldn't eat. I remember the first thing he said to me when I got back into Nobles, when he flew me back from Liverpool after all my surgery. Woke up one morning and they just said, "Right, you've got to eat that." And it was a fry-up, trying to get me to put a bit of weight on again, and I just could not eat it. So it was all these sort of things that you had to sort of break through to getting back to full health, really. It's a massive, massive challenge, isn't it? It's incredible.
I actually had a psychologist visit me in hospital. This is when I come back from Liverpool. And, I'd had the kind of big soft tissue operation, big long operation. Been in Liverpool a couple of months, came back, and I was like, well, I'm on the way now. She kind of, in my view, she kind of put a dampener on things because I had this ultra positive mindset. And
I suppose similar to what you described.
Yeah, she said, I've come to see you because some of the surgeons and nurses think you're a bit too positive. Right. And I lay there thinking, what are you on about? I'm trying to be positive here. You're telling me that, and I can see why they sent her, and I was a little bit off with it, to be honest. Basically,
I suppose it's a fine balance because it's good to be positive, but if you have a setback, because it's the high, the low becomes even lower, isn't it?
And I didn't appreciate how it's still touch and go. I mean, the muscle graft may not have taken. It was still quite a new kind of operation. I can't remember if that time if I'd had my leg pinned initially, but I was still kind of thinking, right, I'm gonna get through this, and I just felt it was a real sort of check in my sort of positive thinking. And at the time I was thinking, well, why are you doing this? Why are you saying this? Because you kind of, it was kind of like a distraction. And she never came again. So
don't want to see you.
I guess you got the message, but I think, like alluded to earlier, in hindsight, I probably should have taken advantage of that sort of thing because, when your whole focus becomes, getting through it, and when you kind of leave that security blanket of, being cared for in hospital physio, it hits you. And you kind of think, well, what now? And you kind of then tend to dwell on things and the negative aspects.
Yeah. Do you think, looking back now for both of you, do you think you're better people for your accidents, stronger people?
I think, I'm not sure about better person or anything like that, but I think as the way I view or approach certain things, maybe I might have worried about certain things. Excuse me. And I think, I think back to like
trying to get your socks on.
Try to get my socks on, but even further back than that, like when it's a real morbid thing to be going on about, but like when they say, right, we're going to do your surgery on your back, and they say they've got to make you fully aware of all the risks, and they're rattling them off, and mortality's mentioned, blindness, you could be paralysis and all. And you're thinking, right, that's real, that is raw, that is like holy, and it makes. I think probably what's come out of it is I appreciate things more. I was 23 back then. I was fairly savvy with everything going on, and I was happy and doing things. I was respectful and all the rest of it. Trying to be a good human being and all the rest of it,
Did it mature you, the accident? Not that I would say you were. I wouldn't obviously know, but do you think that?
Yeah, definitely. I grew up a little bit.
Well, both at young ages. To deal with at that young age.
It's when I look back and like 23, that is young.
I was looking at the photographs, baby face.
It's there's a lot of positives that have come out of it as well, and I think that's one thing. There's a lot of, even in the most negative of things, there's always a positive you've got to pluck out of it and focus on that to move forward, and not to dwell on things and just try and be positive but realistic.
Yeah, I think you got to. My dad, who sort of died a few years after the accident, he said out of anything bad, something good will come out of it. At the time, but I think back now, I think, well, if I hadn't had it, where would I be? And I don't think I'd be doing what I'm doing now, or I haven't got a clue what I'd be doing. I literally haven't got a clue. I'd probably be in a job I wasn't enjoying. Who knows? But I think you look back and what happened, and with anything you got to make the most of it. Your situation, and it's hard sometimes, and obviously you get your down periods, but I made a decision fairly early on. Once I sort of got after a couple of 2-3 years down the line, I thought, I don't want it to define me. I want to make my mark. Doing something else and doing something positive. I don't want to be known as the guy who fell off the tram. Did his leg in or whatever. I wanted to do stuff. I wanted to travel, and I was fortunate in that. This was another sort of added complication to stuff, was the legal, the compensation process, which was 3 or 4 years.
Right.
But I don't want to sound too mercenary, because I didn't play up on it. I didn't sort of aggravate my injuries to sort of get money. I was awarded a sum of money. It wasn't a huge amount, but it enabled me to travel and see the world. And then when I was travelling the world, I decided that I wanted to study marketing, and I went to Australia the first time and loved it, and thought, I'd love to live here. So I applied to do a master's degree in marketing in Melbourne, and I got in. And
here you are.
The rest is history. And I think so out of, my dad was right. Right in any sort of, with any negative. If you sort of, obviously things fall the right way and you put your mind to it, then good will come out of it. And I just sort of contrast it to, well, what if I hadn't had it? Sounds a bit weird, doesn't it?
No, well, no.
But it just, I literally can't think what I'll be doing.
I think that's part of the reason I want to chat. And again, I didn't really know any of the stories in detail, but I always got that impression there's positivity in there, and I think it's important that people listening when they're going through tough times, whatever that context might be, from an injury to just a tough time in their life, that there's positives to take out of it. You might not see it in that moment, and again, we have such short vision of things, don't we? Again, we talk about something that you guys, this was day on day, this was a grind, this is a reality, but looking back, it goes so quickly. But that's one of the main reasons I wanted to chat about this particular subject, because it's not about getting into the detail of the trauma, but it's about, people go through hard times. Everyone does in different formats, in different contexts, but you can take positives out of it, try to push the negatives out, and in fact, potentially it was not all positive, clearly, but there's rather than dwelling on it and feeling like a victim in some ways.
I mean, we touched on it before we were on air, that I never spoke about it, particularly in a career context, because I didn't want to be seen as a victim. You don't want to put down on your CV, I managed to take action against my previous employers, because you're just seen as a problem, and somebody with a victim mentality maybe. So I kind of steered clear of talking about it. I just got on with stuff, and I think, like I said at the outset, if you can vision your, where you want to be, dedicate yourself to doing that.
Yeah, it's that drive, motivation, all those things we talk about on the sports podcast.
Yeah, you can do it, and I guess Conor's in the same boat. It doesn't really be defined by what happened on the
100%. Yeah.
Must have got the podium. He's. I see him as a successful motorcycle rider, not as the guy who fell off.
It's the coffee man as well, and the pizza man.
Well, it's actually more of a coffee man now, and I'm a big fan of his product. But yeah, he's achieved so much success. Obviously in bike racing since the incident, but also in other walks of his life. Both from the
it goes back to that. I wonder
side.
whether you'd be doing it. I don't know, but whether that would happen, whether you just be, if you hadn't had the action, you'd just be racing now.
It's a bizarre thing. I was the accident and what unfolded after that really was my introduction to drinking coffee. It sounds ridiculous, but it was literally. I stayed again, going back to having that network of people around you, good, real solid family and friends and people around me, and I stayed with some close friends, Peter and Marcus, and I'd never drank tea or coffee before that, and the occasional cup of coffee would sort of arrive one morning. I was like, all right, I don't mind this, So that's where it really, that was me sort of starting with coffee drinking, but what it really highlighted, the whole incident, the big thing about having the crash and really not knowing where the next penny was coming from, being on the rags of me, really, was a massive eye-opener. And I thought, I need something else if I'm to have a living, really, later on. There's life after motorbikes, and it really highlighted, I'm so passionate about racing with motorbikes, and it's what I do. But it can be over just like that, and I want to do other stuff in my life as well. And
I think it helps. I mean, we talk to athletes about not having an identity outside their sport. They're so focused on their sport, and then when an injury comes along, it F's the head up so much more, because that was their identity, and it's like, what else have I got? So those extra things, as they are, help that bring in perspective as well. Plus, then, if this is lost, so you have an accident tomorrow, you can't race again, there's that hole to fill of, I've still got an identity, it's coffee, it's a business, etc.
It's business has always interested me, from when I was probably in my late teens, really. I've always had an interest in businesses. I've got friends who own businesses, and you get to understand how they do things in their field, and I've always been interested in it, and I wanted to do my own thing, my accident made me appreciate there's more. Sounds terrible.
100%.
There's more to life than racing motorbikes, and it's still my main thing,
That's what so many of our sport podcasts are about. We love our sport, whatever that might be, or whatever we're doing. But there's always more to it, whether it's those things. So Rich then just talked about how it changed, or you went travelling and studying. For you, I suppose, just to finish up, really, back on the bike. When did that start happening? Getting back on the bike and.
The crash happened in the June, and I was back racing. Then 9 months later,
Wow.
So the accident was 2010. I was racing the following TT.
Right. You in great shape then?
I was in terrible form.
All right, okay.
I was in terrible
Try to be
shape.
polite. Right.
I mean, I'd only just started to put my socks on, like. So.
Oh, right. Jesus.
What about mentally though? I mean, you could have been in great shape physically, and obviously you weren't. But I mean, how were you, in the head?
I was tired.
Right.
I was tired. I think really that's, my physical state was. I was basically, I could barely change gear properly. My left side, because of all the trauma my left side had it. My left humerus and whatnot. I was weak. I could still ride. I was in control, but 2 laps into a 6-lap race, and I was tired.
I know ultimately you were racing, and you said you wanted to get racing back as soon as possible. Were there some of your friends and family saying maybe you should not come back if you're mentally tired? You're not as strong as you used to be. Let's give it a year. Let's give it a year and come back 100 as close to 100% as you should be.
Yeah.
But I suppose with that mindset you have, it didn't really matter. You wanted to kind of prove and get back as soon as possible and say, that accident isn't me, but I'm back and I can do it.
The conversation was had for definite. Because obviously, and they're bound to be concerned. My family, my family are my rock really, and I love them to bits, and they've been great. And but I always discuss things. Even like when I decided to do my first TT, I was still when I made a decision. I was 19 years of age, and looking back, that was unreal, really. So it was a discussion after my accident that how are you? They would never say, "Do you really think you should be doing this?" It was like, how are you feeling, and what's your sort of thought process? And I wanted to do it, and I was achieving my goal of getting back racing from when I was flat on my back in hospital.
Yeah, and you talked earlier, about those small goal settings, and irrespective of whether you felt you were super competitive that year, it was just a goal to get on the bike, race, still probably 100 and whatever mile an hour lap. It was just another good stepping stone.
That's what you've been thinking about since day one of rehab.
Yeah, and the best form of rehab for me was being on a motorbike, both body and mind, really. And it really, really helped me out. And to be able to... I went to Brands Hatch in the March of that year to go and do British Championship ride as well, and I qualified. I fell just outside of the qualifying maximum, and they had like a last chance qualifier for the main race. So I ended up in that, and I finished second in that race, or third. And I qualified into the main race, so I was racing in that category. I was at the qualified basically for the top group, and so it started to come good. And then we had a decent Northwest 200, and which is prior to TT, and then TT came around, and I was a weak man. I'll be honest with you. I was nowhere near. I knew I wasn't going to be competing for race wins or podiums, but I finished 5th. In the super sport race. It was a 3-lap super sport race. Finished 5th the year after flying down the mountainside and beating myself up. And so to come from that to putting the things in motion, little targets, and achieving them, and just picking them off one by one. By the time I got to first riding my bike after, when I first went and tested, to then landing at the TT and then getting that 5th, it was like
unbelievable.
A massive like stick in the ground, and that was the point, the foundation to build on, and we just went on from there.
Not to try and bring it down or anything, but no. It was more just a question of how did you find your first racing lap going past that area? Did you? I know you said when you're on the bike, you've kind of just got to be in the moment. But was there a flicker of trepidation on the start line, or even just thinking of that moment, you know, in the back of your head of this part's coming up here?
Can I tell a story before you say that?
Yeah.
You remember James McBride?
Yes.
He had a massive spill at Gorsley years ago. And I remember chatting to him, I don't know him, just at the grandstand, and I asked him that exact question of, you know, you come into Gorsley next time around, 100 and whatever. And he said it was a real mental battle coming into there.
Yeah. Same, really. I'd had a huge mental battle before, you know, a 12-month sort of. And then it all came to, I went out on my 600, a super sport bike, and I think I'd just passed someone prior to the mountain mile. I was like, right, okay, we're not far away now. And it was.
I love that you're thinking about that. You're doing like 180 mile an hour at the mountain mile. I'm thinking, yeah, shit, we're coming up here now. The rest of us would be just hanging the F on, wouldn't we? Sorry.
I mean, I just, you know, built up and I thought, I came up onto the corner and I just went around just like normal.
Right.
I just pinned it as I would be on a racing line. Obviously, I wasn't as committed and as fast as prior, but
as well,
for me to be able to get to that point, I thought I've got to smash through this and just get around it, and I did, and it felt amazing.
Right.
Because really, that was sort of finished a lap in theory.
Yeah. Oh right. Yeah.
You know, and so massive head game, and got to get to that point was huge, and it's got better since.
Yeah. Fucking boys are nuts. Wow. I presume I know well, it's not a sports podcast. I'll have to get you on to just talk about your career in general, but just maybe just one question on that. The whole, you guys like 3 corners ahead when you're racing, thinking, again, I might ride my push bike and think about a pothole a little way down the road. Obviously, everything's going so quickly. You just come accustomed to that over 2 weeks, and it's not what you'd perceive as a blur to you.
It's just totally natural.
Right.
By the time, I mean, first night of practice or first 2 nights of practice, you're always sort of thinking, right, you know, dust on the road like we discussed about before, and there's not an awful lot of grip down, and you sort of riding well within yourself the first couple of nights, and then it starts building up, and then you just, by the end of practice week, come first race day, you're just riding totally on feel.
Right.
And it's like, it's all gut, it's in your gut, and you know, I don't particularly ride 2 or 3 corners ahead. I'm just like looking at my markers, my braking points, and how's the bike feeling, and you know, because as well as focusing on the road ahead, you got to think about what the bike's doing underneath you, you know, conditions, and it's all feel. I ride everything, my bike's everything on feel. It's the only way I've ever done it.
Do you know what gear? So, because again, one thing that always amazed me, you jump off like a 1,000, get on a 600, and your braking points are obviously completely different. But that's all just natural. You just know.
Yeah. It's quite a thing to be able to do, I think, because it's.
I get off my site, right? So I've got 2 push bikes, one with caliper brakes, one with disc brakes.
Yeah.
See, the braking's completely different on them.
Yeah.
And you go up to the first few halt signs, and either you're throwing off the bars, over the bars, or you roll over the halt sign because you've got a different bike. So to do that at 20 times the speed.
That's just experience, doing it for so many years, and having a great, going back to that network of people around you, your team, you know, the experience that's there. They can all, like Clive Padgett, my team boss for Malenko by Padgett's Motorcycles. He's an absolute expert. You know, he's run teams in Grand Prix and was a top deck racer himself, but you do your laps in practice, and like you say, you can ride, potentially I'll ride 3 bikes in one night, 600, Superstock, Superbike. They all feel totally different to each other, and yet we sit down to do a debrief, and it's like, how's the bike feel through this corner, what gear you're in, how's the gearing feel, what's the temperature of the bike running at, you know, all these things, and you've got to be able to rattle them off, because you think practice week is a week. You think you've got bags of time.
Oh, I bet it goes in a heartbeat.
But it's gone. And to be able to, you go to a short circuit race, do a BSB race or something like that. A track is no more than, say, just over 2 miles. No problem. Rattle every corner off in my head. I can tell you what gear. See when it comes to TT and it's over 37 miles. It's a different animal, and it's to be able to dissect everything down, it's, you know, and I feel that's a skill to have, you know, that's what I really enjoy about TT. It's so technical, and it's just a massive physical challenge as well, and I just love doing it. It's
I say, you know, I'm sure on 600s corners are taking it, not different speeds but different gears, or you know, corners where you can go flat out on a 600, but not on a big bike, and just to not even be thinking about shit on a big bike and hit a brake early. It's just instinct built in from obviously years of experience. Yeah,
and then you just ride on feel. You know. 600, I would say in some corners around the course, you're actually more committed. You're the most committed on the 600 than you are on some other bikes.
Right. Fascinating. Well, I'm going to have to ask you for another podcast, I'm afraid. Just I do love the TT. No, I appreciate you guys coming in.
No, thank you.
Said it was about hopefully people taking some inspiration from setback and showing you can take a lot of positivity out of it. So I appreciate it, guys. Thanks very much.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. It's a word out from Martin.
And word out from Matt.